asset flip, trash game, shovelware, quantity over quality, all of these terms for one simple fact: a bad game. By the way, did you know that PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds actually had the controversy around the game being an asset flip? If you want to know more about that, the link is in the description. But in today's video, we will be discussing about asset flipping. Let's find out together. In this video, you'll find out what is an asset flip, how this term came to be, and what exactly led to this. And last but not least is how to create a game and ensure it's not an asset flip. If you are currently working on a game project or thinking of starting a new one, you arrived at the best place. Here on this channel, with the information that you will find in these videos, you'll be one step ahead of your competition. So consider subscribing if you want to know more. So what is asset flipping? Well, asset flipping is a term describing really bad games, mostly which have been made with assets found on Unity's asset store or ripped directly from other games. Who actually invented this term? Probably it all started with the feud between Jim Sterling, a YouTuber, and a game company called Digital Homicide. If you are a game developer, you might actually be doing asset flipping. If you want to find out how not to do it, then stick around to the end of this video because more information is coming up very shortly. How did we arrive here? How that team is flooded with a lot of asset flip and bad games? Well, I put on my detective hat and did some research to summarize everything for you in this video. For this, I actually had to go back in time. The year is 2000, and in this year, before Unity, Unreal Engine, Godot and other game engines, the place looked completely different. It was the year when Diablo 2 launched, Deus Ex launched, Counter-Strike, Red Alert 2 and other awesome games. There is yet to be a digital distribution because Steam was 3 years away from being released. Most games were released on CDs instead of like what today we have on digital distribution system. Well, let's do a thought experiment. You were an indie game developer in the early 2000s. How would you create your game? Of course, you wouldn't have had any help from a game engine because those were non-existent or proprietary, so you would have to learn like DirectX or OpenGL for graphics only, and then you would have to implement the physics or other mechanics yourself, so you basically had to do your own game engine. And then if you finish the game up, then you would have to somehow distribute it to other people. But wait a second, there was no digital distributions yet. So you had to bundle it in CDs, which was not an option unless you would go under a publisher. So you see, there are a lot of barriers for the typical indie developer. It was really hard to get into the industry and mostly it was dominated by big companies. So how did we arrive from the early 2000s to the year 2020 where Steam is literally flooded with asset flips? Well, there's only one thing that we need to mention: game development democratization, which is a blessing and a curse for the game development industry. Let's find out the exact events that led to this. 2003, Steam gets released. The first big digital distribution system gets released. People now can download and purchase games online. That is a big leap forward from the physical distribution. Of course, at this stage, Steam was only available for big companies to publish on. 2005, Unity gets released. This is a step forward because game engines are getting released. Of course, initially Unity was only for Macs, which still was a pay barrier for most people because could not afford easily to buy a Mac. 2009, Unity gets Windows support. So you see how everything builds up slowly but surely, and now people can have access since the PCs have a lot of varied prices ranging from cheap to very expensive, so a lot of people can actually jump onto this boat. 2010, Unity gets Asset Store. So with the addition of Asset Store, people can actually invest money and zero effort to buy already made assets. 2012, Steam releases Greenlight. With this mechanism in place, indie developers can publish their games onto Steam if they reach a certain level of voting. So it was a matter of convincing people with fake videos and fake texts and other means of deceiving them to push their games onto Steam. 2017, Steam Direct launches while Steam Greenlight being cancelled. So what this means is that the developers don't need people support anymore. By just paying $100, they can publish anything they want on the Steam platform. 2020, Steam is filled with asset flips, but of course players learn their lessons, so few of them actually buy them. There are also a lot of reviews putting a lot of mostly negatives on those games. Plus Steam implemented the refunds functionality because of the law probably. So now people are getting a lot of refunds based on if they actually like the games or not. So this was a short history of asset flipping. So if you're a game developer and you want to publish your game, being the game labeled an asset flip is actually similar to your game having a lot of mostly negative reviews. It's no coincidence in fact that these two go hand in hand. Let's now get over a list of tips that will help you to avoid making an asset flip game. Tip number 1. Have a cohesive art direction. So it's no problem getting 1 or 2 assets from the asset store. The problem is that if you put a lot of random assets together, you'll not have a cohesive experience. So try to create a proper art direction and give each asset your own twist to it. For example, changing some textures, some colors, or if the asset is modular, try to make it your own. And make sure that you deliver a proper, unique experience for the player. Otherwise, it will be clearly noticeable the fact that the game is an asset flip because nothing comes together properly. Tip number 2. Never rip off assets from other games. Usually people try to rip off assets from big games, so that's a tough issue because you might get into copyright infringement or even other problems with laws, because usually these companies have a lot of power and a lot of money, so they can hire a lot of lawyers. So steer clear from this direction. Plus, a lot of people might actually know those assets, so it's much easier for them to label your game as an asset flip. Tip number 3. What if you are a programmer and don't know how to do art? Well, don't worry about that. If you don't have money to freelance the art on Fiverr or any other freelancing websites, you can actually make programming art, for example, using simple shapes or cubes. For example, Minecraft is made with programming art and it's a success game. So you don't have to worry about art too much. Plus, Blender is more accessible than ever, so just by searching it on YouTube for tutorials, you'll find a plethora of tutorials that might help you get started with Blender as a programmer. Tip number 4. Don't aim for AAA quality. It's certain that on the asset store you can find AAA models, at affordable prices even. The problem is that you won't find every model that you need for your game, and you cannot provide a proper cohesive experience for the player, and they'll quickly notice the fact that some models look really good while others look really bad. So don't go for AAA quality, but instead go for an art direction which you can actually provide from start to finish. Tip number 5. Don't go ever to quantity over quality. Don't release games that are not playable, that have a lot of bugs. Try to release games that have a clear, proper, fun game core loop. If the game that you're working on seems too big, no problem. Just make the scope of the game smaller so that you can achieve it. But don't push a lot of games and try to sell them, because in the end you won't make a lot of money. Try making good quality ones. So if you make an asset flip, it's a certain way to make sure that your game goes to the garbage bin of game development. What you can do instead is consider subscribing to this channel, because I post regular videos about how you can improve as a game developer and you can be one step ahead of your competition. I'm Adrian and I'm signing out.